Hi Hoopers! Today I'm going to show you how to wrap a hoop in something a little different than tape. Right now my current project is to use these cute little strips of vintage cloth to cover my hoop, and I have a lot to say on the subject of decorating your hoop and things other than tape. So right now I'm just going to show you my technique that'll work both for strips of cloth as well as spools of ribbon. So if you have like these little spools of ribbon, you can get these anywhere, but this will work for both of those things. If you're working with cloth and ribbon, you'll kind of have to remember that you don't want to use really heavy cloth. If you cut up denim, certain kinds of denim are going to be really heavy. Certain kinds of leather, suede, corduroy can be pretty heavy. Burlap tends to be pretty heavy, so you don't want to weigh your hoop down too much, so just keep that in mind. And there's also different kinds of ribbon. So there's, I think you might be able to see, this one is pretty silky, it's really shiny. It's not going to really give you that much of a grip. But I do have a ribbon that's more coarse. Good, I'm just like Calamity Jane here. And so I don't know if you can see it, but this ribbon is pretty coarse and there are ridges in it, so that's going to give you a pretty good grip. Depending on what kind of ribbon you use, if you're going with the silky one, you might want to use a gaffer tape or like a hockey tape just to give it some grip so that it's not just sliding off your body when you're hooping. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing all the materials that you want. For just a heads up, I created this cute little red hoop for a 4th of July parade. Just the costume was supposed to be red. I needed something red, and I picked up randomly just this kind of mesh ribbon. You don't want to use this because as soon as you drop the hoop, it's gonna rip all to pieces, and which was fine because, you know, for me it was just like a one-day hoop thing. But you definitely don't want to spend all the time and all the money getting this on your hoop and then just have it rip apart. So don't use those. I know they're really tempting because that was so shiny, it's so pretty. They come out with a lot of cool ribbons like that for especially the holidays, but don't use them because they're really bad. So first things first, like I said, I want to cover my hoop in these strips of cloth. For the most part, I try to be pretty straight with my cuts on this cloth. This actually was a dress to begin with, but I knew I wouldn't wear a dress that long. It went all the way down to my feet and it looked goofy on me, so I just cut up the rest of it. It's now a short little sundress, and I took the big piece of cloth. Here's all the preaching about reusing, recycling, etc. But I cut up the cloth into those little strips. For the most part, I kept them really straight, but I know that I'm covering up the edges with a decent amount of gaffer tape, so I didn't need to be super straight. You probably want to be a little more straight than me. But let's show you what you need. First, you'll need Scotch tape, painter's tape, some kind of cheap tape so that you can keep your cloth or your ribbon steady on the hoop while you're working with it. You can also use some gaffer tape or some of the other tape that you have handy, just not too much because that might get a little expensive. And then of course you need your hoop, and what other any other kinds of tape that you want to use, go ahead and use those too. And this technique, the way I'm doing this, you don't need glue to keep the ribbon or the cloth on, which saves a lot of time. Glue is really messy. It feels weird after you use it, so I try to stay away from it as much as possible. So with this technique, you don't need to use any glue, and for the most part, it'll stay really well. My current favorite hoop, this guy right here, I mean, it looks pretty bad because it's really dirty. It's been to hell and back, and by hell I mean a playground, several playgrounds and lots of kids, but it's gotten dirty, it's gotten soaked a couple times, but it's still just fine. And you really can't tell with that particular ribbon, you can't really tell that it's been beat up. So it really is durable, and you don't even need glue as long as you're using a tape. That's a pretty good quality. I get my gaffer tape from Identi-Tape, so I'll put that link in the video later. So we'll just start off with, grab the hoop, and of course, you're going to need some scissors for this too, because it's no fun to cut cloth without good scissors. And so you'll just take your first strip of cloth and use your Scotch tape. Now, we're not going to put the Scotch tape on just yet. We kind of want to position the cloth on here without securing it yet, just so you can actually slide it around to kind of get the spaces in between the right length that you want. And it's really helpful if you have one of these like cloth tape measures. I use this a lot just to measure out some of my spacing, make sure that I'm making sure that I do everything right. So those are really helpful. And once you've kind of got a spacing that you like, you can just put your cloth, your Scotch tape on the cloth, tape it to the actual hoop. I don't know if you can see that there, but it's taped. We just want to tape it down temporarily so that it stays in place while we're working, so we can kind of keep adjusting. And like I said before, this technique is really good for correcting your mistakes if you make some. Sometimes it can be difficult to go all the way around the hoop, and then at the end you realize you're kind of off in your spacing. So this way you can take the cloth all the way around the entire hoop and then adjust it according to where the spacing is at the other side. So it's really convenient. And just take your time with it and make sure that you've got all the spaces the way you want. And now my spacing is going to be a little strange because the ribbon, cloth, I didn't cut it perfectly straight, but I'm doing some eyeballing here. And then there's more Scotch tape. So maybe you'll be able to see this easier, but I'm just taking that Scotch tape and making sure everything stays put. Okay, so right now we have one strip of cloth covering the hoop in a spiral pattern, and you can get creative with whatever patterns you want to use. So for the next one, I'm going to choose another strip, and then the end, a couple of my ends are actually hemmed. Like I was saying before, this used to be a dress that I cut up. So if you do have edges that are hemmed, put the hemmed ones overlapping the first cloth strand here, and just try to line it up just like you would tape. It's pretty much the same thing. And now we're gonna Scotch tape that one on just to hold it. Usually I use like painter's tape because I find that it's got a better grip than Scotch tape. And I always have it around the house because I'm always painting things. Okay. So just keep going around the hoop and adjusting it as you see fit. Okay, so now at the end of this one, I'll tape it down. And next I'm going to show you what to do if your cloth doesn't have a hemmed edge. Okay, so you just grab your other piece of cloth. And if it doesn't have a hemmed edge, let's find one here. Okay, so this edge isn't hemmed. To keep it from looking bad or unraveling, I'm just going to fold the edge over a little bit so it just looks very neat and tidy. And with that folded edge, we're going to cover over and overlap the last strip of cloth, just like we did with the other one. It's pretty simple and straightforward. Now the Scotch tape, we're using a lot of it, but it's temporary. It's not going to stay on the finished product. We're going to take it off as we go through and actually put our real tape, the gaffer tape, on here. Okay, and there you have it. Now you can put your tape around in the spaces. You can use gaffer tape. You can even make mixed tapes. Oh, I'm funny. Where you can use, I was actually planning to use some of this new silver that I got, put it in between these, the spaces, and then put a little gaffer over it just to make sure everything stays in place. So I'm going to do that, and I guess I'll show you guys the end product. But for the most part, that's how you put cloth, or that's my method of putting cloth and ribbon, spools of ribbon, on your hoop. And another thing, you can get pretty creative. Like I said, you can use different kinds of tape and mix everything up, or there are different sizes of ribbons. So if you cut different sizes, I hope you can actually see it on this one. But there we go. You can cut different sizes of cloth, or you can get different kinds of ribbon and put them in between the tape. And you can get really creative. So yeah, that's pretty much that. If you have any questions, just feel free to let me know, and I'd love to see all the different things that you guys can come up with. Thanks.